Hello, everybody. Come on in, get settled. It's 6:59. We'll do official welcomes in a minute. My name is Justin Rivers. I am Chief Experience Officer with Untapped New York, in case you have not met me yet. But I know a bunch of you know me well and will already start putting your hellos in the chat. And we're at 7. So welcome, everybody. Very excited about tonight's virtual book talk on the abandoned resorts of the Borscht Belt. We are being led tonight by Marissa Scheinfeld, and I will tell you a little bit about her in a moment. But first, a couple of things to keep in mind tonight. Please feel free to chat and comment here in the chat tab. And I know everybody, some people are already starting to. But if you have questions for Marissa, please put them in the question tab, which is right next door. That'll make it easier for me when we do Q&A at the end of her presentation. Also, if you're new to Livestorm, if you're having any audio or visual issues with the presentation, it's always best to refresh your page. Don't worry, you won't have to log back in or use your link. You'll be brought right back into the presentation. And if you are not an insider and joining us tonight as a ticketed guest, our insiders are joining these and all of our talks for as little as $10 a month. And it's unlimited access to all of our talks, to all of our in-person events, and also our 100+ strong archive of programming that we've been doing since last year when the pandemic hit. Also, really great offer. If you do not have a copy of the Borscht Belt yet, you can use the link at the bottom of the chat to get a 30% off discount. You have to use the code 09flyer in all caps, and you can get a copy of the book discounted. Without further ado, I'm going to read you a little bit about Marissa, and then she will get started. Marissa Scheinfeld was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1980 and raised in the Catskills. She received a BA from the State University of Albany in 2002 and an MFA from San Diego State University in 2011. Her work is motivated by an interest in the landscape and its embedded histories, both apparent and hidden. And there's much more to her bio, which you can find on the event page, but I am going to let her get started. Let me just first say hello to a couple of people like I want to always do. Welcome everybody in. And then it's all Marissa and a bag of chips. We're very excited about this. So hi, Norma. Oh, Norma, it's been so long. Good to see you. Jeffrey from the Upper West Side. Robin, good to see you. Julia, listening from Durham, North Carolina. Great to have you. Nicole is back in Massapequa. And home. Good to have you home, Nicole. Stephanie in Scarsdale. So good to see you again, Norma. I know it's been a while. Morbo, you are here. I know where you're coming from, Delaware County. Lorraine from Asheville. Cynthia from Los Angeles. I'm just going to say hello. Everybody is welcome, and thank you for being here. Gareth from Wales, still on a real good clip, Gareth. Marissa, take it away. We're super excited about this. Happy to have you. And I'll see you at the end.
Great. Well, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you to Untapped City. And this book came out in late 2016, and I worked on it for over 5 years. And it's a labor of love about the land that I love. It's based off of really my life. In many ways, I grew up in the Catskills. I'm currently in the Catskills right now speaking to you. And the project is based on this experience of being a child in the Catskills, hearing about the Borscht Belt, seeing some of it, working at some of the hotels as a teenager, and then really from about 2012 to 2016, exploring every element, every facet, every kind of remnant of the Borscht Belt that I could find. So what we're going to do today is look at the Borscht Belt, its rise and its fall, its history, its contemporary, and what I like to call the luscious chaos that I found in the broader landscape. I called it Revisiting the Remains of America's Jewish Vacation Land because I love the idea of going back to a place that has been so cherished, such a huge part of Jewish American history, New York State history, even American popular culture. I'm happy to lead you through this, and really appreciative that there's still interest in the book. I always call her like an old lady because she's been out for a while, but the Catskills is a fascinating place, and even looking back, I'm still so fascinated by it, and while this is a personal story, it's also collective. And it's also an ever-evolving landscape that's continually changing, even to this day. So the Borscht Belt is located, or was located, 90 miles from New York City, and the highlighted county in red is Sullivan County. It was largely all of Sullivan County, but also encompassed a bit of Ulster County as well. Due to the fact that it was so close to New York City, it really allowed it to thrive. The New York Times says that in 1965, there were 538 hotels in the Borscht Belt. Now, this is just the southern part of the Catskills. The Catskills is home, or was home, to so many other areas for so many different distinct groups of people, cultures, and even races. And this particular area had 538 hotels and 50,000 bungalows. So this is a map of everything that I was able to find. And it's roughly about 50 different locations. In blue are all of the hotels that I found, and in gold are the bungalow colonies. It's important to say that many hotels, when I started working on this project, had been purchased, repurposed. Some were Orthodox retreats, some are meditations, ashrams, some are rehabilitation centers, some are prisons and correctional facilities. So I was really looking at the hotels that were considered eyesores, these looming behemoths, these previous grand places that were now sitting for 20, 30 years, and really symbols of failure and stagnation in a region that was once so popular, that really culturally and economically saw a lot of devastation, and only today is picking itself back up from that era. Cartier-Bresson is a fantastic, like the GOAT of photographers. And this quote really resonated with me. Photographers deal in things which are continually vanishing. And when they have vanished, there is no contrivance on earth which can make them come back again. This is an image that one might have seen driving up to the Catskills in 1965. For anyone that maybe visited these hotels, some of these names will ring a bell. The Browns, the Windsor, the Pines, the Aladdin, the Levitt. Most of the images, or most of the hotels in this image, are no longer, meaning there's not even a trace or a foundation that exists. The Borscht Belt was known year-round. It was a haven for American Jews. It was a place where they went year after year, some to the same hotels, some to different hotels. It offered leisure, entertainment, recreation, and really a place to be amongst others. For various reasons that I will get into later in the talk. But the Borscht Belt was really born out of anti-Semitism, because Jews were banned from going to hotels and places of employment in America in the 1920s and 30s, as were other groups. So they created this place where they can be. They could be with each other, they could not be persecuted, and they can enjoy a quintessential American experience, which is to have a vacation as a complement to the hard work that we do in life. On the top is the Imperial Room. It seated over 3,000 people, and that was at the Concord. It was the biggest showroom in all of America, out competing Las Vegas and Atlantic City during its day. On the right is the Stardust Room at the Nevele, of equal tremendous, beautiful theater. And on the bottom is the Twizzle Stick Lounge. A big part of my process, a huge part of my process, is research. My research is done over numerous years. It's something that I start with, and then I start photographing, and then I go back to research, and I use Google Earth, archives, archival books, memoirs, historical accounts, conversations, social media, friends, and family. And it's a really huge part of my whole process. So all of these things that I'm showing you are things that I found along the way. This is an early brochure from Sullivan County, #1 in the nation for a zestful, restful vacation. Anything that I've heard about the Borscht Belt, and living some of it as a child when I was at the Concord and I was a lifeguard, was this word fun. It was a place where people really did celebrate so much joy. Families were forged, friendships were forged, and many of these bonds continue till the present day. Growing up here, it was really unavoidable to hear a story about, how busy Monticello used to be, or the acts that performed, and the musicians and the comedians, and all of that just kind of glamorized the Borscht Belt for me. And I knew that when I started with this project that I really needed to do my homework. So I'm going to take you through a short abridged history of really how the Borscht Belt came to be. And it starts with the earliest of the earlies. And this is the Lenape Indian tribe. They were a peaceful hunter-gatherer tribe. Their present-day territory occupies Pennsylvania, the Hudson Valley, New York, New Jersey, and parts of Long Island. They were pushed out by European settlers who had heard of the rumored riches of the Catskills. And when I say riches, it's not money, it is resources. You have to think of the Catskills at that time, late 1700s, even early 1700s, as a rocky, rugged, mountainous region, inaccessible. There were no roads really up here. There were no railroads, and there was an abundance of wood and an abundance of trees. And its proximity to New York City and Philadelphia was really what drove these early settlers to come in and push out the tribe, unfortunately, and displace the tribe. And this is an early photograph of an early visitor, Dutch German settlers. What happened is that the first industry the Catskills saw was this lumber industry, and the Borscht Belt is the third. I will get to it. I know that's why you're here. But the lumber industry cut down wood and logged it down the Delaware River and helped build up cities like Philadelphia and New York City. What happened with this lumber industry is after a while, the natural resources were depleted and the trees were largely kind of down and cleared from the region. Well, that industry died out, and the next industry that rose during the Civil War was the tanning industry. And this is the Monticello tannery, and the tanning industry made leather and many goods. And Sullivan County was known to make like the most leather goods during the Civil War. But with the tanneries came roads, and with the roads came railroads. So what happened is a very desolate area starts to become populated. And this is, this is the Monticello Tannery at the top that burned down in 1924. And the bottom is the Hanford Mills, 1895. So just a little bit after the birth of photography. So what happens after the tanning industry actually dies out, these two industries rise and fall real quick. People start to hear about the beauty of the Catskills, and because it's accessible, they start coming up. It's not American Jews that start coming up, which were really the bulk of the Borscht Belt visitors. It is fishermen and writers and lovers of nature. And the slides here that you see are people fly fishing in the Beaverkill River and one of the first hotels, the Beaverkill Inn. This is a very famous painting by Asher Durand. It's called Kindred Spirits, and it depicts Catskill Falls. This painting was a tremendous part of what was called the Transcendental Movement. It was an artistic movement. It was very philosophical. It was very spiritual. And it was a group of artists who celebrated this idea of landscape and mindscape. And in this sense, they were really on a quest for spiritual identity, progress, and social justice. And what you have here is these two people contemplating the Catskills, its beauty, its vastness, Mother Nature, and it has become a symbol for American landscape painting. So what happens around this time in 1900, and this is the Kiamishi Casino, is Sullivan County, like most of the US, catches railroad fever. And boosted by the railroads, this early tourism trade that began with fishermen and artists and writers began to blossom. Once a super desolate industrial region, Sullivan County very quickly becomes a tourist destination. It offers visitors fresh air, clean water, and really a respite from the city. This is an early postcard, a little bit north of the Borscht Belt, but I love it. Greetings from the Catskill Mountains, the best place on earth. Pretty girls, good hunting, elves playing ninipins, which I've yet to see, and lots of kind of opportunities from bathing to winter sports. Again, this year-round mecca. These are some early postcards that I found, all in this way for me to piece together this visual timeline, because I really wanted to understand, like, Why was I looking at the remnants of this wonderful era with 538 hotels and thousands of bungalow colonies, and why did it fall apart? So I really needed to string it together. So this is 1907, the Regatta at White Lake, which is now seeing a rebirth. Around this time, something else happens, and this is the boom of tuberculosis sanitarium in Sullivan County. The idea at the time was that people afflicted with tuberculosis could go up to the mountains to breathe in fresh air, and that fresh air might alleviate symptoms of tuberculosis. Locals did not enjoy the fact that the area was becoming known as a haven for those that were sick, and there was a ton of pressure on the sanitarium owners to close. In addition, at the time, the polio epidemic was rampant in America, and people were told, not unlike they're told now, to avoid large crowds, to avoid swimming pools, to avoid public places. So what happens is you have this area, it's accessible to New York City. There are some hotels, there are farms, and there is this open land that really is unused. And then you have this magazine, Jew Jokes, that's distributed in America, 1908. In the first half of the 20th century, discrimination against Jews was widespread. Anti-Semitism affected employment, social club membership, and vacation access. This is just an example of one of the many pamphlets. This is the Craigsmore Inn. If you're familiar with this landscape, it's just on the mountains beyond Ellenville, on the Shwangunk Mountain Ridge. So you see this beautiful watercolor, image inside pamphlet, and then you look on the left-hand side, on the bottom of the page, owing to neighborhood preferences, Hebrews are requested not to apply. I've seen much documentation like this, shunning visitors, also letters to quintessential, like, "Dear Mr. Goldberg, we do not employ your kind." Unfortunately, this level of discrimination and hatred just continues, and it's a very disheartening thing to look back at the past and just keep seeing it repeat itself. Nevertheless, what happens at this time is there is a huge Jewish immigrant population coming into America. They want to experience American lifestyles, and Jewish investors and entrepreneurs began to buy small properties in the region, many that were abandoned. So small farms, boarding houses, and small hotels. And this is a postcard from the railroad station in Liberty. The railroad station is now closed. It's long been closed, and that building is still there. It houses a medical equipment office. So that's how the Borscht Belt came to be, really because American Jews were not allowed to go anywhere, not allowed to check into a hotel. They made their own place. And here we move into the Borscht Belt. Greetings from Sullivan County. This is Grossinger's. It started as a farmhouse, and of course it expanded tremendously. Grossinger's really had its own zip code. It had its own airport. It had an indoor-outdoor swimming pool. This is the original main building and its staff. An unbelievable architectural phenomenon of an indoor pool built by a man named Morris Lapidus, who went on to build the Fontainebleau and many hotels in Las Vegas. Borscht Belt hotels were models for Las Vegas hotels. Grossinger's was really it. Its slogan was "Grossinger's has everything," and you really didn't have to leave the premises. But there were 537, if you will, other hotels. So there was the Hotel Zeiger. When I found it, it was called the Palms, but it also turned into the El Dorado. Each hotel really built itself on having this modern amenities. It was very mid-century modern. They all competed with one another for the best acts, the best shows. This is the Concord. It was a stairway that was just built for like parading. It wasn't really functional. People just kind of walked down it. And it was a really big kind of day and night life in the Catskills. This is probably my favorite postcard. And the book has a lot of this ephemera, but this postcard I gave like a real center stage. I really feel like it encompasses and encapsulates the Catskills to me. You have this beautiful background of the mountains. Then you have this mid-century beautiful building with that lovely turquoise, the pool, and then everyone kind of gathering around the pool. This is the Laurels. Every hotel had its slogan. The Laurels was like, "Go to the Laurels and lose your morals." So the Catskills catered to all different groups of people, all different price points, all year round. Of course, it was known for the summer. That's kind of how it has implanted itself in American popular culture and even in the Jewish experience. This is the Browns showroom. Comedy was invented in the Catskills. Really, stand-up comedy found its legs in the Catskills, and I'll get to talk a little bit more about some of those amazing performers that really told their worst jokes. The book has 3 essays in it, one that I wrote, one written by Stephen Canfor, who wrote a phenomenal book on the Catskills in the 80s, and Jenna Weissman-Josselett. Jenna Weissman-Josselett writes a really eloquent essay, but it's also very tongue-in-cheek, and she talks about how like photography in the Catskills is like cream cheese to bagel, meaning that they just go together, meaning that all of our experiences at how photography ties into memory, it ties into vacation, it ties into celebration, and here you have an image of someone making an image of this lady in high heels in the pool, but then someone in the background photographing. And it just brings up ideas of why do we photograph and what are photographs? They are really these time capsules, and they can transport us back and forward. The Catskills had like these DJs of the time. They would be called tumblers. We would call them kind of MCs now, but this was Lou Simon Says Goldstein in Grossinger's, and he was a legend in his day. I've never eaten in a Borscht Belt dining room, but it is important to say that they were an all-you-can-eat experience. That experience really modeled how cruise ships eventually created their whole all-you-can-eat buffet, as well as all really kind of inclusive resorts. This model was really like where it came from. But I love this as a photograph and as a narrative. You have, starting on the left, this woman looking on in her black rimmed glasses, a man blowing his nose. You have these 2 women kind of exchanging like a piece of food or something. The man is choking, and then this other man here is like engaged in his food. I think like eating is like a real Jewish, Italians also, it's like really loud and raucous, and this is how I envision a Jewish dining room, and all full of like tons of food at table 89, and you can just send the food back if you didn't want it, and it was just copious and really gluttonous. This is the staff of the dining room. So it's important to say that when you have these huge industries that pull in money and pull in tourists, there are the people behind it. And when those industries fall out, and this is a problem in America across the board, there are thousands and thousands, if not millions of people that are affected by our decisions to just stop going to the hottest place. Talk about all you can eat. This is a typical menu from the Borscht Belt. On the left would be like all the offerings of the food. So there's like 5 drinks and 10 entrees and like 8 desserts. And on the right are all the events. So anything from bingo to, I love this, a happening with Murray Waxman. I would love to go to a happening right now. Arts and crafts and swim. And it was really just the place to be. If you think about like the most like popular destination or the most popular restaurant or hotspot, that's what the Borscht Belt was. So again, 5-star, 4-star, 3-star hotels. Some were kosher, some were not. This is Esther Manor, a small hotel. I'll show you some images of it when I found it. This is the bungalow, so it's kind of important to talk about that bungalow history of the Catskills. It was a very different experience than staying in a hotel, but nevertheless, this is Slavin's Bungalows, what it offered, Rosenberg's, and Wisp Wigwam. One of my favorite images that I found to date, most of the images that I have found are all housed out of Brown University. There is something called the Catskills Institute that was started by Phil Brown, not of the same name, not relation to Brown University, but Phil Brown has been such a wonderful resource for me, as is John Conway, Sullivan County's historian. But I found this on the website, and I loved these 4 women. How just kind of elegant and classy they are. The summer day in Monticello, I think this was from 1943, this photograph. This project also really was a connection for me. At the time when I began, I was living in California, and I really was never the type of photographer that wanted to make an image of the sunset, even though I do appreciate them tremendously. I was really missing home. And it's one of the reasons why I think I began this project, was to reconnect with myself And in that sense, I looked at my family archives. These are my great grandmother at the top, my father and my mom's family. And, it really brought me to this place where I began to feel like reconnected to my home. And in that element, I was really fascinated with finding out everything I could about it. This is my great grandmother. And that's me with my grandfather at Kutcher's. A lot of people have always remarked, I'm 40, a lot of people have constantly remarked to me, like, what do I know about the Borscht Belt? Because it's typically, like the baby boomer generation and older. But my memories of it are very vivid and they're very full. And they're also very bittersweet, like many, because that time has passed. And many people, including that man on the left, that's my grandfather, has also passed. Nevertheless, there was so much going on in the Borscht Belt. Like, this is the great postcard. It's the take it easy, because you're so having so much fun kicking back and you have no time to write. So you just check off your whole experience. So, like, dear husband, I am blue. This place is rainy. I do lots of reading. I need cash. That's a good one. Business is improving, and each kind of town produced these, and they're really awesome, fun little postcards. It's kind of impossible also to talk about the Borscht Belt without remarking on the celebrity presence, from Paul Newman to Elizabeth Taylor, Duke Ellington, Sammy Davis Jr., Louis Armstrong. I mean, the name goes on and on and on. I recently found a photograph that I love. I don't have it in here, but it's Alan Arkin and Elliot Gould filming a movie at Grossinger's, and it was made by Mary Ellen Mark, who just phenomenal. So such a celebrated, wonderful photographer who left this world way too soon. This is Eleanor Roosevelt walking through Grossinger's, and Dr. Martin Luther King speaking at the Concord. This is Golda Meir, the Prime Minister of Israel. So it just kind of shows you how prominent this place was. In addition to the celebrity and cultural figure, political presence, there was also a huge, huge sports component to the Borscht Belt. And you have Rocky Marciano, Floyd Patterson, Muhammad Ali trained up here, and Wilt Chamberlain, who is in this photograph on the left playing basketball, who we all know, most all of these people just rose to such fame. And then comedy. So when no one knows anything about the Borscht Belt, sometimes I've always said I photograph the aftermath of Dirty Dancing to some, but to others, you just have to say the name Mel Brooks. Well, I don't know, controversial name now, Woody Allen, Jerry Seinfeld, Joan Rivers, Rodney Dangerfield. I found something in his archives when I was researching this book. It said mountain jokes. It was his jokes to try out in the Catskills, just in case they weren't funny, because he was going to go to a club in the West Village and perform them. Who else is here? Sid Caesar, Henny Youngman, Toady Fields, Marilyn Michaels, so many people. Gilbert Gottfried told me he got laughed off the stage. Mel Brooks told me he got fired for not being funny enough. So this is where the Borscht Belt really impacts American culture, because of the spillover of comedy and how all of these entertainers graduated to television and movies, in addition to the many musicians that performed at the hotels. The list goes on and on and on. So now we're kind of moving through time. This is the 1970s. This is a really wonderful series that I found in the forward by Ronnie Stevens Goodman. She came up here to document the singles weekends. And as the Borscht Belt was kind of declining, they really tried to get people to come back up here. And it was via singles weekends. But I love these photographs for their color. And again, that time capsule quality that just kind of brings you back to this moment, this era. And the failure of the Borscht Belt really can be talked about on so many levels, but historians say that the era really started to decline in 1965. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. Late in the 70s, a photographer named John Margolis came through the Borscht Belt just as things were closing. And I love his photographs, and I want to share them, just a few with you. I felt kind of a kindred to him in a way, and I wish I could have met him, because he was kind of like photographing the tail end and You know, myself and many others have photographed in this area are now like photographing the demise. These are all headlines that came out of the Times in 1996. In Catskills, resort's death darkens the view. Our town's a tradition and a resort at twilight. Grocingers closed during Passover, hotels sold, and the hills were alive with the sound of tumbling, which is like excitement and activity. You know, this failure of the Catskills has been said to be a number of things. Some say it was the boom of the airline industry, the cruise industry, where you can go to 5 countries in 4 days. You have new destinations, Atlantic City, Las Vegas. Women took on a more active role in the workforce in the 1960s. You also have the era and the decade of the 60s, which was the Vietnam War, sexual revolution, civil rights struggle, so much going on. So in this time, in the 60s, when historians say the Catskills declined, it kind of coincides with the signing of the Anti-Discrimination Act, which now allows Jews, people of color, and other minority groups to travel outside of their own little bubbles. So this is one of the reasons, and the many reasons. In addition, it's said that the Catskills did not keep up. And also the fortress and these large hotels, which are problematic in a lot of other countries, where you go to Jamaica and you never leave the hotel. Why? Because the hotel has everything, and you don't go to the little towns and help fuel the economy of the mom and pop shops. So these fortress hotels and everything going on in the country, and really the newer generation not wanting to go back to the Catskills, all kind of contributed to its demise. I think it's not really fair to say it's one thing. It was sort of this perfect storm that had been brewing. Nevertheless, it left behind a tremendous legacy. And I have a traveling exhibit. It was supposed to open at the New York State Museum, but due to COVID, it's been put on hold. But a lot of these ephemera items that I've showed you and these 3D items are all in the exhibit, as well as some in the book. The Catskills has like been written on from here to like A to Z, from memoir to archival book to more. For me, it was using all these things as resources, as well as looking at its impact, from Dirty Dancing, A Walk on the Moon, and all of these movies. And then there was kind of my place. So I mentioned that I started this project in late 2011. I was in grad school. My previous projects were very dark in their content, if you will. I had photographed Holocaust survivors, concentration camps throughout Europe. I was really always looking at Jewish history in a way. And when I was back in San Diego, I was kind of uninspired in a way. I felt like I wanted a little more meat in the photographs than like sun. And a mentor named Arthur Ullman, who started the Museum of Photographic Arts that I worked at for a few years, he gave me the best advice. And he said, shoot what you know. And those 4 words, shoot what you know, were really the fire that lit inside of me to begin this project. And it sustained me for 5 years. This idea of going back, finding this place, my hometown, I knew the history, I knew of it, there was a lot to learn, and that's really where I began. And I started using a process called rephotography. Photographers have been using this since the birth of the medium. The idea is that it's repeat photography of the same site, and there's a time lag between the 2 images. In other words, it's a now and then. It's a visual method used to understand change. So I would take a postcard found doing my research, and this is the Laurels in Sackett Lake, 1965, and I'd go to the Laurels and I'd try to line myself up perfectly where that photographer was standing. It's a very kind of cut and dry process, but when you're on, you're on. It was really frustrating at times. Sometimes like there was not the place to stand. I didn't really have a ladder with me. Sometimes structures were changed entirely. Here's another one, the indoor-outdoor skating rink at the Pines. And then when I found it, it was really like a skeletal version of its former self. But putting these 2 images together really started this light in my brain to think about time. What happens over time? How does it change us? How does it actually affect the built environment? And how do these structures that fall to social and cultural change, how are they affected by these places, by time? This is the new indoor pool health club at the Laurels. And I kept doing this over and over. Here it is in the winter, and all you can see is that like lima bean shaped pool. And this is what I thought the project would be. Sometimes I was successful with it, sometimes I wasn't, but overall it was like finding a treasure map, which was the postcard, and then going and relocating that place where that image was made. But what quickly happened was that I realized that there was much more of a story to tell than this now and then. And that's really where the project took a big turn. So the book shows some of these rephotographic diptychs in the beginning, and then it leads into the series. Because what started to happen is I'd go to the ice skating rink at Grossinger's, but I would see something else, and it would really deviate me off of my path. And that's really how this series came to be. I'll try to talk about these as not only photographs, but also inform you about what maybe is going on present. This project has a lot of roots to it. It's about the Borscht Belt, but it's not nostalgic in the sense that it's very raw. And it's not the Borscht Belt that maybe you might have known or just seen in the slides. So Grossinger's closed in '89, but it was bailed out many times. And in their bailout, they kept doing these really adventurous things like building this carport that they never finished or building a new lobby. When I found it, I came up this disused driveway thinking no one was there. And of course, someone comes down in a golf cart. The golf course was open, and it was until many years. So in that sense, these little kind of serendipitous things were how I got access. Access was either by conversation, driving around, speaking to locals, good fortune, serendipity, and persistence. These are stairs in the Tansville Hotel in Parksville. If you ever come up to the Catskills, I encourage you to take a drive. It's so beautiful. But if you notice as you're driving, there's so many little stone pillars with nothing behind them. It's often that these stone pillars were markers indicative of an entrance to a hotel or a bungalow colony. Well, there was nothing left of the Tansville. It was completely razed. Even the pool had been dug out of the earth. But I saw these pillars and I thought, wow, like how strong are they to persevere through 30, 40 years? And then the overgrowth was just so beautiful and peaceful. But at the same time, it was like this entropy and this abandonment was everywhere. The Paramount Hotel in Parksville also had recently closed when I photographed it. And, I, of course, am looking at the sky and I'm looking at nature and I'm looking at the hotel and really just this sense of abandonment. Shuffleboard courts. At first, I started to just look for any remnant, any relic that I could identify as the Borscht Belt. Even if it was a pool a couple hundred feet in the woods, I wanted to find it. And some images were made with a little more emotion. That I think they're all made with intellect. Some were made with emotion because I remember learning how to play shuffleboard. Not on these courts, but on others. And, it kind of pulls the heartstrings. This is the lobby at the Homowac. The Homowac closed and then reopened and then closed. In some cases, I did trespass. I know I'm talking to probably a group of a lot of urban explorers. I don't prefer to trespass, honestly. I think photography should be a slow process. It should be meticulous, it should be thoughtful, and it should be contemplative. So I avoid trespassing, and I'm really just nagging people all the time to get access to places because I love to take my time to really study, to go in when I want to go, and I'm working with all natural light, and I'm working with a medium format camera and a tripod. There's no tricks, there's no extra bells and whistles. It's all just as I've shot in camera at that moment. There's no manipulation here. So this was the Stardust Room at the Nevele, and I loved how that gold lame curtain was still hanging. The Nevele closed. It was supposed to be a casino, did not get granted that, and it still sits abandoned and even in worse shape than it is here. So some places were just like left and I couldn't even identify them. And this was an unknown bungalow colony in Liberty, New York. This idea of how long could you just like walk away from something before it starts collecting dust and then weeds start growing through and then the ceiling starts caving in, and time and weather and the effects that it produces were really fascinating to me. This is a guest room at the Paramount Hotel. There was no bed left, but those two reading lights are indicative really of like travel. And those lights that you flick on and off in your room. And I loved the texture of the wallpaper and that real kind of like sandy color there. So I work with a medium format camera, and really everything is up to time, nature, and chance. These are still lives, and none of these are manipulated, none of these are staged. I look at photography as a really powerful tool. I think it can be tremendously manipulative at the same time. And because of that, like my religion with how I photograph is really just what I find. And because these hotels have been left in such a chaotic state, whether vandals, squatters, scrappers have been in there, people have been taking out furniture, places have been kind of for sale and torn through, I just used that as kind of my tableau. So all of these are as I found it. And in that sense, I feel like I'm an archaeologist. I'm always looking for remnants of the past, but unlike an archaeologist, I'm not really like chiseling the surface. I'm just documenting what's there. And in that sense, it's just true to color, true to the story as much as I can. This is Cooper's Sunrise Bungalow Colony in Rock Hill. And if you've ever been to a bungalow colony, it's like a little rickety, a little worn, kind of like homey and creaky. And that's how I loved how this came out, like in this really beautiful summer day. Some hotels were just like found pool lying on the side of the road, and this is the Lesser Lodge. And I start to see this growth coming in, and really just this sense of just like beyond abandonment, just like left apocalyptic. These were found stacked like this, pots and pans, whether it was by the chef or by someone else. But fascinating to me how these places just felt like people walked out and never returned. And these scenes of apocalypse were kind of everywhere, and it was a theme. As I was searching for evidence, you see the human constructions altered by nature, you see the neglect of humans, and really the leftovers. And this is a laundry room which over time had just like developed this patina and this rust and these sheets. And I love the green and the colors, and just really kind of spending time. I went to each of these hotels maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, some dozens of times to see them in all different times and all different light and seasons. This is Kutcher's. I went here as a kid. This was actually one of the most heartbreaking photo shoots for me because most of them felt really adventurous and exciting. Like there's like this natural high, I think, when you do what you love. And for me, it's photographing. But when I went to Kutcher's, I just crumbled inside. And I saw the pool table. I don't think it's in this slideshow, but the pool table that I learned how to play pool on. And I remember just crying the whole way home. And in that sense, I started to realize that, while this project has an undoubted, kind of melancholy that runs through it, that melancholy is really real for so many people who did spend their childhoods and their lives here. This is a kitchen at the Nevele. I love that light just kind of peeking through and that diagonal that happens with the pots and pans all the way up the wall. This is the Hotel Leroy in Loch Sheldrake. Some structures are just lying in the woods. There's really like nothing left of them. But this quest just to find as much as I could. This is an elevator shaft at the Tamarack. And what was really, really interesting to me and really kind of upsetting is there's really no Borscht Belt Museum. There are plans. There's a gentleman who would like to create one. There is a historical society in Sullivan County, but there is not one integrated museum that celebrates this huge moment in American culture, Jewish culture, and New York State history. So when I look at these photographs, what I hope that they are is they're a documentation of like this once was. And this to me is like a totem pole. It is this elevator shaft that managed to be the only thing that wasn't ravaged by a fire. and how strong it is to just subsist and persist. And it's still there. And it's a marker, like we were here. Um, and until there is a museum, until there is something, I look at these photographs as this documentation of places that are no longer. This overpass is completely gone, and even though it looks like the insides and the guts of the hotel, because literally that's what it is. This place has been kind of lying for decades, and there's a trace of the past here, but it's really kind of clouded in so many other issues that are going on, political, social, economical, in the county. I love this one. This is a bowling alley, obviously, with the bowling ball. But I love that bowling ball. It was sitting there and it reminded me of the earth. It was obviously blue and circular, but the Borscht Belt was like the center of the earth for so many people. So some of the images kind of touch on a lot of like pathos. And some I try to maybe take a little bit more of a lighthearted stance. So besides this apocalyptic vision that was really happening and unfolding, I also started to see this really strange repurposing of spaces that were once intended for something and then became used for something else. So in this case, this is the Black Magic showroom at the Commodore Hotel in Swan Lake. This was a showroom full of chairs. All the chairs were actually in the back, just piled up in a big, huge pile. And it's been turned into a skate park. So peculiar to some, but I will say that growing up in Monticello, there was nothing to do after the Concord and Kutcher's and many of these hotels closed. And I saw that in my teen years, where it's really not so difficult for me to comprehend why a group of kids or teens or even young adults would turn an empty, abandoned place into a skate park. The county doesn't have money for a skate park, and they've now kind of reused this for their own form of entertainment. So it's still being used in the same way. Same with the dining room at the Pines. Oh, I love these hot pink chairs. I'll love them forever. So it's these hot pink chairs for me, but it's also the fact that this is a paintball battlefield and the tables are being used to block people, and the hot pink walls and the textures and the splatter of paint and all of these kind of layers are really what kind of kept me going. This is the lobby that they were building at Grossinger's when it closed. So my theory, if you look up at the top, is they spackled it and they started to paint it this peach color, which was like a 1980s real classic peach. And then the hotel closed. So they stopped finishing it. And then squatters and spray paint artists have gone in there to finish it. Grossinger's was completely torn down about 2, if not 3 years ago. I am not sure what's going on there. It is very unclear. It was supposed to be saved dozens and dozens of times. And it wasn't. And this is the kind of story that you hear always with the Catskills. Like, it should be a historical landmark. It's not. It's razed. And now a condo is built on top of it. So it's tragic. But in the same sense, I think with tragedy, there's always comedy. So for me, like, there's an element of comedy here. It's like, who set up table 12 for me? Put the fruit and the fancy napkins twisted up in the wine glasses. And like, I found this here, and this is what drove me, because I never knew what I was going to find. Here, I encounter these chairs and they're all facing one another. So to me, it feels like a conversation was happening or has happened. And then there's the mid-century architecture and the lighting, and then these remnants of birds that had been kind of inhabiting the space. And there's a lot of different forces happening here. We think of ruins as places that are thousands of years old, where we go to the Middle East or Tibet and we trek up mountainsides to see these remnants of past civilizations. But these are ruins standing in America, 20, 30 years old. This room is so majestic and was so majestic. And it's just such a heartbreak that it was knocked down, and that it wasn't saved. So in that sense, I look at the act of photography as an act of preservation. No matter if these images are easy to put in a box and say they're sad, I think that's too easy. I think that they're more than that. They're filled with story, they're filled with history, they're filled with, yes, contemporary narratives. But if you look in the back, That red curtain is still hanging, that same curtain that rose and fell for so many shows. And as you move into the foreground, you see insulation, you see the mark of spray painters, and you see the weathering of the place and the rusting. And then you really see Mother Nature, who has in full force reclaimed so many of the hotels. This is the Palms. It was El Dorado and Zyger. And when I found it, all you can see was the S. PALM was gone. It was like Mother Nature was just swallowing up the hotel. And I remember for a long time, when I started working on this project, there was a lot of like people, even my own family members, that would say, there's nothing there, there's nothing there. And it was like this constant, like, why do you want to go to Grossinger's? There's nothing there. And it took a long time for me to say, well, you're not looking, because I think that there's so much here. There's so much here, not only in the historical sense, but there's so much here for us to reflect and learn upon. And then there's the memories and the stories that are also intermingled with the photographs. This is a greenhouse. Yes, it once grew herbs, but look, it's left and it's untamed and it's beautiful. But it's also an effect of kind of this American epidemic where we just use and suck up and discard. And this is an issue across many different cities, from Detroit to Rochester to Western Massachusetts. And this is like a problem. Stairs in the pines leading up to one kind of like room, and then an up close version where you're kind of seeing Mother Nature and man like battle, and you're not really sure where one ends and the other begins. But it's always that Mother Nature is like the more powerful force. Like she's just rampant and she keeps just coming. The outdoor pool at the Pines to me reminded me of the La Brea tar pits the day that I went there. That white chair in the back felt like dinosaur skeleton bones. And someone threw that blue chair in the pool and it just bounced off the blue sky. And there were frogs swimming and fish in there. And it was just like, it was a scene. This is the Esther Manor lobby. You know, how long does it take for like grass to spring through a floor? And then for that grass to become a carpet adorning the whole lobby of an entire building. This image was kind of like a breaking point for me because I felt like it encapsulated the past, present, and the future. The past is the Jenny G building at Grossinger's. This whole building dedicated to the matriarch of Grossinger's. The present was this bird among many other birds that I found living on I think this was like the third or fourth floor of that building. And then the future was this beautiful little plant that had grown up out of the ashes of the fire. So this idea of this kind of cyclical thing, and also time and how many directions it can move in. It doesn't just move forward, it moves backwards and it moves sideways. And just kind of using that. Grossinger's here, or no, Kutcher's. This is the basketball courts. And in winter, I love the white snow and the red wrapped around the basketball court, and then the blue sky, and then those tracks of animals had been the only ones at Kutcher's. Kutcher's was like knocked down in half. And then they abandoned it they were going to build a yoga retreat. So they knocked down like half of the hotel, and then they abandoned that to build the hotel down the street. So it's still kind of lying there, only a couple of buildings. And it's always been a very questionable kind of construction project. Basketball courts at Breezy Corners. This was, so I just gave Untapped Cities like a few images unseen from the project to run, and they were all from Breezy Corners. So again, that kind of serendipitous thing, driving in the area 5 years, pull up on Breezy Corners, and it's beautiful, kind of like late afternoon. The sun's not too bright. You don't want too much sun with photography. It just blows out all your highlights. So I decided like, oh, should I go? And then I saw a construction trailer and thought, maybe I should like go back and trespass. But then I said, F it, I'm going to ask them. So I walk in, and a friend from high school is sitting in the construction trailer, and he and his boss gave me a hard hat to photograph Breezy Corners that day. And Breezy Corners is now demolished, and there's a casino sitting on the site of it. So that's the story with Breezy Corners. But there's a lot of history that Nicole found, and I gave her some where like Fleetwood Mac and Jethro Tull played there, and all of these like tremendous Led Zeppelin played there. Tremendous like impact again with the Borscht Belt. This is the White Lake Mansion house. I drove by it yesterday. It's like about to fall down. When I made this image, I knew this was going to be the cover. It just like said a vanished world to me. This lawn chair in really beautiful condition, that carpet of moss all in the indoor pool at Grossinger's. And then finding things like this were just really sublime. Going in late spring, the floor is like an ice skating rink, but there's this beautiful plant that's growing up through tile and concrete. And it became surreal in a lot of ways. And I started to see this really peculiar beauty um, peeking through. I call her Sleeping Beauty, this one. This is Perlin's bungalow colony in Glen Wild, New York. Someone had thought that like they can just throw a lot of dirt in the pool. It wasn't going to go away if you threw dirt in it. So now that pool is like a small little forest, and there are vines, and you kind of have to creep through. I just actually drove by the other day. This is down the road from where I am. I'm at my parents' house, and the vines are like starting to sprout again. So it always draws me back in, even though I am currently working on something new. But I'm fascinated with the Catskills, and I'm fascinated with how it was this place and continues to be this place where people have flocked for hundreds of years, literally. And in that, it's always just been a place where people have gone when they needed a place to go and they weren't being accepted. You have obviously the Jewish area of the Catskills, you have a Latino, you have a German, you have an area of the Catskills that was really for the LGBTQ community in the 50s when they were kind of hiding out. There was an area in the Catskills for African Americans that was completely destroyed that I'm actually researching now. And it's so fascinating. This to me is like a Stanley Kubrick homage where I saw all the doors open and I just put my camera on a really long exposure and just kind of stood there studying this like really interesting wallpaper. Some people weren't as open to me photographing at the hotels as others, and this is just this gentleman who was kicking me off the property at the Young's Gap. Not before I made an image of him, but this is kind of to show you the many people that allowed this project to happen. I could not have done it without the help of friends and family members who accompanied me most all the time. These places are very tenuous, they're very unstable. Many people continually still get arrested there. I actually almost got arrested there, but I ended up knowing one of the cops from high school, so it turned into a photo shoot, which was kind of funny, but also not. And then I went back to the police station and just convinced those cops to keep letting me in that hotel. And they were just sick of looking at my face. So they just said, fine, go. This is the one wing at the Tamarack that was left that didn't burn and has that past, present, future thing going on for me, where it's like the past is this Tamarack Lodge. Janis Joplin played there. That's a good fact. The present is this unmade bed and the phone off the hook, which has its whole narrative there. And the future is this green Mother Earth creeping in, but I love that blackness at the bottom right and how there's this light and dark. And that light and dark is in all of us, right? Prayer book at the Homoac just left open to this page. I had a rabbi translate this page. I thought it had like hidden messages. Poker chips and cards, all of these discarded things become these really colorful still lives. But then you see checks left behind, ice skates cast aside at the Homoac Lodge, and then another pair that had literally looked like they were encrusted with like maggots and I don't know, but equally I think just so beautiful in a way. I think, that's what photography is. It's light, right? So it's like using light and just enhancing something or just showing it in its best light. This is a logbook at the Concord Hotel, logging in visitors. And again, all the seasons were super important, not only because the Borscht Belt was functioning in all 4 seasons, but each season gives a different color, palette, texture, feel, vibe, energy. How could you walk away from this like ice circle really fun. Um, Couple more here. This is the Browns. The Browns burned in a fire. It's still kind of partially standing. There's been litigations going on, and I convinced the lawyer to let me on that I needed the Browns in the book. It was the home of the Jerry Lewis Theater and had such a big Borscht Belt presence. And you can see in the back there are sprinklers that were putting out the fire that day. This is the ice skating rink at the Nevele, um, a site that I hope that they do save. As I mentioned, the Nevele was supposed to become a casino. It's still for sale, but this beautiful pagoda-shaped, gorgeous ice skating rink, unused, untapped. So much potential in the Catskills, so much that has started to become tapped into before the pandemic, and actually as a result of the pandemic, has continued in a way to now become a place again where people are going to escape the high cost of the city, to move out of the city. And this is Breezy Corners again, that bungalow colony that I photographed. It's completely gone. And you can see in the back here, these are sand pits. And where those sand pits are right now is a casino. That casino has been talked about since I was a child. And I think the casino provided a lot of jobs and also was like another link in the redevelopment of the Catskills. Even though my photographs make it look like the Catskills is abandoned, there are so many things going on here. And it really is an ever evolving, fluctuating landscape. And I'm really excited to see the next wave. When I made this image, the Concord was like in rubble. They had sold the hotel, auctioned it off, turned it into a fireman's training camp, and then destroyed it. And all I could place were those pine trees. These were very iconic pine trees of the Concord. They lined the road in and out. And I remember going there as a kid with my grandpa. And, that was kind of like a little bit of both happening here for me. Um, After 50 years, the Borscht Belt and its passing really has left a scar on the county. And that's seen still, even though there is a rebirth in many towns and hamlets across Sullivan County, Ulster County, and Orange County. And if you look into the back, I think it's the reason why is because the Catskills has long called people. It's long been a refuge and a respite and a source of inspiration for artists and writers and myself. And I think that there is so much potential, and people have been coming for its beauty, and they will continue to come for its beauty. Um, Nevertheless, um, this book was a really kind of fun adventure for me. It taught me so much about my home. And it touches upon not only the Borscht Belt, but it looks at it through a very contemporary lens. This image is about rebirth to me. It's this flower, this fern growing out of the abandoned great blue pool, and I'm standing inside the deep end of an outdoor pool at the Rosemond Hotel in Woodridge. And this is the last image I'll end with. It also is the ending of the book. It kind of symbolizes the end of an era, the kind of falling of Rome, if you will, coffee shop without a counter. I look at this book as an elegy to the Borscht Belt, but I also look at it as a celebration. And I thank you so much for being here tonight. And hope that you learned something about it and maybe take away something and some love for the Catskills. I'm going to end with this before I start the Q&A. It kind of just sums up everything I feel about the book, and I included it in the preface to the book. In the dry places, men begin to dream. Where rivers run sand, there is something in man that begins to flow. West of the 98th meridian, where sometimes it rains and sometimes it doesn't, towns like weeds spring up when it rains and dry up when it stops. But in a dry climate, the husk of the plant remains. The stranger might find, as if preserved in amber, something of the green life that was once lived there, and the ghosts of men who have gone to a better place. The withered towns are empty, but not uninhabited. Faces sometimes peer out from the broken windows or whisper from the sagging balconies, as if this place, now that is dead, had come to life. As if empty, it is forever occupied. And that's from The Works of Love by Wright Morris, who was a wonderful writer as well as a photographer. The book has 129 photographs. It has 3 essays in it. There's an official website, my website. I also sell prints from the entire series. I'm available on social media. I had a child 2 years ago, so some of my recent social media is full of a 2-year-old. But nevertheless, thank you so much for being here. Anyone that's interested in purchasing a copy of the book, you can find it at your independent bookstore, but all attendees, if you click on this link, and Justin's going to put it in the chat, you can get a discount at Cornell Press. And again, thank you all so much. Thank you, Untapped, and happy to be here.
Thank you, Marissa. That was beyond phenomenal. And you've been getting a lot of really positive praise. In the chat.
Cool. I couldn't look at the chat.
No, it's all right. You can look. You can definitely look back at it later. The chat stays live when you get the recording, so you can see it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to questions because we do have a bunch of questions here.
Cool. Let's do it.
And let's start with Lorraine. And actually, before we do, I just want to say, I know a lot of photographers. I've seen a lot of photographers giving presentations. I have to say, without hyperbole, you're one of the best, not only photographers, but also you tell such a great story around your photography. Sometimes photographers are like, they show the picture and they can't really talk about it because it's, you do both really well. So that was amazing. Now, all right, let's get to questions. Was Grossinger's, this is from Lorraine. I'm starting at the bottom and moving up. Was Grossinger's the Catskill Resort scene in the marvelous Mrs. Maisel?
So that in season 2, they went to the Concord, I believe, and it was at the Concord, and they stayed at a hotel actually that's like up in Hancock, New York, where they actually filmed the show, but it was supposed to be at the Concord, that scene, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
But I love Miss Maisel, and they did it really well. And obviously, you could pick apart anything, right? Like whatever. But I think they did it so great, and they put the Catskills back on the map in this era for so many people that had no clue.
It's so true. It became really popular after that.
Yeah, I got like renewed interest in the book when that came out, and I was like, "Oh, awesome! Like, thank you for looking."
Great. Mark asked, Marissa, how did this project affect you as a person? Deep question, Mark.
Yeah, I think this project was like, it was like my springboard to really kind of finding like this. I always was interested in photography. Like from 15 on, I've been interested. But when I made this project, it was like the first real substantial long-term project that I had worked on that I felt not only proud of, but I felt so excited about, and that I felt that has helped me professionally in so many ways, but also personally. It's caused me to be more observant, less judgmental, not kind of looking at things and like just kind of like discarding things, and just being more appreciative about time, my own time passing. And I look at time in a different way now. And I look at it even more, kind of precious now that I've become a mother. And, looking back at this book, and it came out, the end of 2016. So I think I photographed, I said 50 locations. I think at least 30 are gone, meaning that like there's no ruin there. There's not even like a crumble. It's gone. So it's kind of like, it just really, time is wild. That's really kind of, it's changed my perception of time and how I operate in it.
Yeah, that's really great. You said something during the presentation which really resonated with me. You said, time just doesn't move forward. It moves in all directions. And that's, it's something I think we're all sort of experiencing in a weird way right now. And your photography is really a real arresting example of that. Nicole, Nicole put this, but it's from Beth Ann. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Question, are any of these places still open for people wanting to explore? Which I think you may have even covered.
Okay, yeah, so I didn't say it, but there are some places open to explore. I know some people that have continued to explore. For example, like Kutcher's is there, but I'm not saying that you could go, because you could get arrested. The Pines is still there. You probably will get the cops called on you. Grossinger's is gone. There are plenty of people that are up here exploring. I put a preface in the book, like, just beware of trespassing, because what I've learned about abandoned places is they're truly never abandoned.
Right.
There's always eyes on it, whether it's a nosy neighbor, a caretaker, or someone that's driving by, because these places have been left to chaos and local police have their eyes on them, as do others. So be very careful if you do trespass, because when I was in these places, I almost fell through the floor. 5 years, 5 winters have gone by. They're really, really unstable, and I would never want anyone to get hurt. So if you do go, be very careful, park discreetly, and go with someone.
That's really good advice. Go with someone if you're going to do
Oh,
it.
please do not go alone.
Yeah, no, it's not a good idea.
No.
From one urban explorer to, you know.
Especially because, like, I have found remnants of people living in these hotels, and it's like, you're like, oh, living without water and electricity, yes. And there's just a lot of activity around some of these hotels that is really kind of activity that you don't want to get involved in. And so really take caution.
Yeah, very good advice. Mel asked, are all of these images shown in the presentation in your book?
No, so you can't give away the whole cow, right? So I showed you some in the book, some that weren't in the book, but the book has 129 images. So I think maybe there's like 40 that I showed you in this presentation, and then maybe like 15 that aren't in the book, that are like unpublished, and I threw some new ones in just to change it up for me. So there are 129 in the total book, though.
Great. I think you enticed quite a few people to buy this book tonight, if the chat's any indication.
Thank you. You know, and yeah, it's like such a bummer. Obviously, so many things about this pandemic are a bummer, like to do things in person and be able to meet everyone and like hand off the book. But yeah, if anyone wants to find me on social media, and like I could send you a sticker that's like a signed book plate. If you really want me to dedicate the book to someone, I'm happy to do that. Just find me.
Cool. Great. Lorraine asked, did you shoot film or digital?
Oh yeah, I didn't even talk about that. I started the project digitally in 2011 and quickly moved to film. Film for me slowed me down. I think that the digital world is amazing, but I think that photography suffers because we make images too fast, because we have a memory card that holds 500 raw files or 1,000. So when you have a roll of film and you have 36 exposures, you're slowing down because you're paying for that film, you're scanning that film. Also, no shade to digital. I think film has so much more detail. I think the color is better, and I'm shooting in medium format, so I'm really able to have like a big negative and a big juicy print. So I hybridize it. So I shoot on film, but I scan the image so it could be less messy and I don't have to deal with a dark room. You know, it's wrong to say, but I always say film has more soul. But I think it's just because I feel more connected to the process of photography when I'm photographing with film. It's a big debate, right? Film.
Yeah, but it's a great answer.
But that's kind of my answer, and it's what I tell my students. Like, even when we're photographing digitally, which a lot of what I teach at SUNY Purchase, and like a lot of digital and analog program, but I say when you photograph digital, you should do it with the mindset of analog. Because, you know, it's so hard to make one good image and then you make 500 and you're not even looking, you know?
Right. So true. Pete Tannen asked, you briefly mentioned Philadelphia. How popular was the Borscht Belt with Philadelphians as compared to New Yorkers?
It wasn't as popular. I think it was like I don't think it was that popular. I haven't met so many people from Philadelphia that came up some. I know that there was like an area in Illinois that was a small kind of like area for Jews. And then a lot of people told me that they used to go out to like the Jersey Shore from Philly.
Yeah, Jersey Shore's big.
Yeah. So I think that like it was mostly New Yorkers that would kind of trek up to the Borscht Belt. But it was an internationally kind of known place.
Gareth asked, well, first he said, really enjoying these images, incredible. Are these places safe to go inside? I think you've addressed most of this. Asbestos is a huge problem with ruins like that.
Yeah.
So
So I went in with like a steel-toed boots and a sweatshirt, and I remember, I'll never forget one day, like something dripped on me, and I literally, it was like something funky, and I got a rash on my arm, and very, very unstable, tenuous. I mean, I don't really get into it so much in the book, but like these are environmental, like mini disasters, these hotels, really.
Yeah.
Ecological disasters, tapping into the earth, could be tapping into water sources. I mean, like it's a big, big, big problem. And the fact that these ruins are still there is, there's a lot of cultural, ecological, political commentary that can be made. Yeah.
For sure. Pete also asked, the Laurels Hotel image listed poolorama. What is a poolorama?
That's a good question. I have no idea, but they called it a poolorama because it had like a hot tub room and then a cold. So like the Borscht Belt was modeled off of those like European bathhouses.
Yeah.
If anyone has had the privilege of being able to go to like Europe or even the East Village, where you go into like a cold plunge and then a hot plunge. So they had like, you go into a hot tub and then you immediately go into a cold hot tub, and it's like really good for your skin and it's a shock to the body, and they say it's good for your blood pressure. So and then you could like go to the pool. So it's like a poolorama, I guess. Yeah.
Everything was an orama back then too.
Yeah, they also gave
popular.
like fun, funky names,
right.
make it enticing. Like a poolorama sounds better than a pool.
Yeah, for sure. This is a good question. Would Mohonk Mountain House be a survivor of the era? Isn't it older?
No.
Yeah.
No, it's not. And no shade to Mohawk Mountain House, but I already showed them the letter that I found, because that letter that I found that said, "Dear Mr. Silverberg, we don't employ your kind," it came from the Mohawk Mountain House.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it was a different part of the Catskills. I love the Mohawk Mountain House. It's beautiful. And I think that after I showed it to them, they were very, very surprised. Obviously, that letter was written in like 1926.
Right.
But different part of the Catskills, not necessarily the Borscht Belt, Mohawk Mountain Houses, and that whole kind of like green upper area of the Catskills. It was not like, quote, Borscht Belt.
Right. Okay, so Sandra, the question, what colony is the basis for Marvelous Mrs. Maisel? We answered, that was the Concord.
The Concord, pretty sure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What has been the impact on what remains of the Borscht Belt of the influx of the Orthodox Jewish community?
Yeah, so in like the 90s, after a lot of these hotels closed and the bungalow colonies closed, the Orthodox Jewish population bought up tons and tons of properties. And what happens kind of now is like those properties, like anything, are mostly kind of quiet in the winter, and in the summer, the area I think probably quadruples with tourists, not only like the summer visitors of like the secular nature, but there's a huge Orthodox presence. It's a bit of a dilemma with the locals, because a lot of these places have a religious marking on them and they don't have to pay taxes. And I think with the Orthodox community, my family like 2 generations ago were Orthodox, and I know a bit of it, and I understand the cultural and social differences. I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding with a lot of the locals up here, and there's a lot of disdain for the Orthodox community. And and again, it's just like this place of like lack of education on both sides, and unawareness and respect. And it's like, it's so frustrating, just because I feel like there's so much just hate in America, and it's just like it keeps coming out. But yes, many towns like South Fallsburg, predominantly Orthodox. But if you're into that kind of thing, you can go and get some really great falafel and go to some bakeries and like go patronize, and we do in the summer. But many don't. And that's kind of it's a smorgasbord up here, where you have like the Orthodox, then you have like lots of millennials coming up looking for that retro experience. Then you have lots of baby boomers who have second homes here. Then you have like lots of people my age who are maybe relocating here or vacationing here. And then like there's just a lot going on up here. It's a real kind of like new melting pot.
Yeah. I have quite a few friends who moved up to the Catskills, and one of them, and I can't remember what town, opened a small lodge up there. They were both artists, and one was a photographer, one was an artist. They just decided, let's do this. And it had a whole, this was about 5 or 6 years ago, had a whole new, Brooklyn flight appeal to it.
Well, that's what's happening. And then you have the
Yeah.
Wall Street Journal and like New York Times doing these like foodies in the Catskills, breweries, like,
Right, right.
like you go to Narrowsburg and it's like bookstore, editor of Out Magazine opened it up, and then editor of Vogue opened up a shop. And, there is a lot of rebirth happening. And it's really, if you look at the history that I showed you, with the lumber, the tanning, and the Borscht Belt, after one dies, another takes its place.
Yep.
And my theory with the Borscht Belt has always been that it's going to take a lot of time. Granted, like 1965 was the decline and the 90s was the real death. But look what's happening in 2020, 21. It's rising again. So it's like this roller coaster. But unfortunately, there's a lot of pain and devastation in those down periods.
Yeah, for sure. Norma asks, do you know anything about the Stevensville Lake Hotel?
Yeah, so the Stevensville, I really tried to get access to the Stevensville, and when the owner said no, I just kind of respected it. So it did not end up in the book. But what did happen was that owner sold it to the Orthodox. From what I've heard, it's not being used, because I was speaking to a friend about it, and I was planning on just, I always am just interested in like what's going on, so I was going to drive by. But I heard that there are people there watching the hotel. Whether they're doing something with it or not, I don't know.
Okay. We got 3 more questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
Cool.
So thank everybody for submitting questions, and due to time, we'll leave it with these last 3. So Cynthia asked, was Dirty Dancing filmed at one of these old resorts?
No, Dirty Dancing was filmed in Virginia, and yeah, I've always wanted to know if they even asked Sullivan County to film it here. But when I did show that picture of Lou Simon Says Goldstein, his late wife Jackie Horner was a dancer at Grossinger's, and apparently she helped the screenplay writer to write that film. And of course, it has like truths to it and fictions. But it's meant to have happened like at a hotel like Grossinger's, but it was filmed in the South.
Interesting. I'm going to leave Jennifer's question for the last one, because it's a good last question, and I'm going to go to Patricia's. I am definitely looking forward to your work on the African-American era of the Catskills. How far along are you with this?
Sure. So I would say that like when this book came out in late 2016, I spent most of 2017 speaking about it. So it took a long time for me to think about a new idea. And I started conceptualizing a new idea in like 2018, 19, but then I got pregnant and embraced that. So I have a son, and now he's about to turn 2. So I've been after like a little bit of dragging my ass during the beginning of the pandemic, like I think everyone was, just because of just the shock of everything. I've been researching for the past 6 months, and I've started to shoot over the last few months, and have some images I made when I was pregnant. So the book is coming together. It's probably going to take another 2 years, I'd say, for it to come out, because I tend to work really long term, and I don't want to rush it. But the concept is called Once Upon a Time, and it looks at the hidden, unknown, sometimes very controversial and darker histories of this region, and meant to play off the preamble of Once Upon a Time, but instead of a fairy tale, it's going to be a little bit of a text-based book that'll go into like the truth of really that space. So from unmarked sites of the Underground Railroad to this one town that I'm looking at called Luxton Lake that was destroyed by New York State. It was an African-American vacation destination, to kind of other like kind of controversial places, or places where you might drive by and you don't really know what happened there. That's kind of what the book is looking at. Yeah. It's
really cool.
Still working on it, but and of course it's going to have castles in it too, because Once Upon a Time has to have a castle in it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. And then you answered Jennifer's, which was going to be the last question, which is, what is your next project? So
Yeah, so I'm working on it. I'm hoping Cornell's gonna publish it, and like, you know, I want it to come out, but I want to make it as good as I can, and I also have so much more responsibility in my life right now. But I just the past 3 weeks I shot like 16 rolls of film, and I'm hoping if I got like 2 or 3 good images on there, I'll be so happy. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you
Well,
so much, Justin. Thank you everyone for being
yeah,
here.
Marissa, thank you so much for
I really
your
appreciate
time.
everyone's time to be here. I know we're all like doing our thing, so thank you so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And thank you for bringing this to our audience. And thank you all for attending. Before I wrap up, and again, the chat, I'm sorry, this is so robust that the chat will be there for everybody to read. This page stays active even when we wrap up the presentation. And when you get the recording, you'll be able to see it again. Also for you, Marissa, you should read some of the amazing praise coming in.
Yeah,
Tomorrow night, we hope that you will join us for our virtual tour of the Merchants House Museum. And then Wednesday on the 21st, we have an immersive experience at Pioneer Works. This is an in-person insider experience only. So we are going back to in-person experiences, insiders. I know you've been waiting for a very long time, but we're back. Thursday, April 22nd at 5 p.m., we are talking about the book Names of New York. Names of New York. I'm super excited about that. And we just, again, thank you all for coming. Thank you, insiders, for joining us. And remember, if you'd like to be an insider, you can sign up at untapcity/insiders and use the code join us in all caps for 1 month free. Any final thoughts, Marissa, before we shut down for the night?
no, just thank you, everyone. Take care of yourselves, and yeah, be well.
Awesome. Couldn't say it better myself. Thank you all. Have a really great night. Stay safe and enjoy. Bye, guys. Thanks.